Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the Contradictions Book Tag. This tag was originally created by Daniela from Only If For a Page, and I am probably the last person to be doing it at this point. I really don't think that there's that many people that haven't done it. Everybody that I watch has already accomplished the Contradictions Book Tag. So I have been completely and totally trying to not watch those videos so that I don't spoil myself for these questions. I didn't want to go into this having anything prepared. That might be a mistake later on. We'll find out. But anyway, question number one is I love this genre, but I didn't like this book. The only one that comes immediately to my mind is How to Be a Badass Vigilante. I read this book last year and thought that it was going to be really cool because it was urban fantasy and like a woman finds a spell book and becomes a witch and uses it to become a vigilante for other people, and she like practices her spells to like save other people. Everything about that sounded like it was right up my alley. This is perhaps not fair because all of those things would have been up my alley had their writing not been absolutely atrocious and very fat phobic and sexist and awful, and if you want to see my review for it, you can find it on Goodreads along with a bunch of the highlights that I did while I was reading it that made me really hate read the book. So I don't know if that really counts just because I would have really enjoyed it had it been better written. So I guess my follow-up answer to that would be The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern because it has a very historical fantasy-esque type feel. In case that doesn't count, I am going to go with a secondary answer of The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is maybe contradictory because this is like a beloved booktube staple. However, I didn't like anything. I didn't think the characters were redeemable in any way. I hated both of them, and the fact that I knew who the romance was going to be between reading that book, I just did not like where it was going. I understand that a lot of people do like it. It just was not for me, and I knew it wasn't going to be for me, so I left off on that one there. And yeah, Cruel Prince is YA fae fantasy. I love that. I'm an ACOTAR fan. I am a Throne of Glass fan. Like, this didn't do it for me. Number two is I rarely read this genre, but I love this book. The book that I think I'm going to choose for this is, I don't remember the name of the first book in the series, but I'll pop a picture of it up over here. Con Iggulden, I'm 100% pronouncing his name incorrectly, and I apologize for that, wrote a historical fiction of the rise of Julius Caesar from the time that Caesar is a kid, like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and I blew through, I think there's 4 books in this series. I blew through them in a matter of a couple of weeks. I like history and I like historical fiction, but I have to be in the mood for it, and I'm so rarely in the mood for it, and for some reason these books absolutely did it for me. I was fascinated, I was hooked from beginning to end, and yeah, these books, if you haven't checked it out, if that sounds like your thing, give them a shot. Get ready for another hot take, but the next question is I love this trope, but I didn't like this book, and I think I'm gonna go with Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I love the joining an assassin school trope, like I love the Assassin's Apprentice trope. Not actually The Assassin's Apprentice because I haven't read that yet, but I hope that I will enjoy that as well. However, like the apprenticing assassin trope, I love, and the entire plot being about vengeance, I love, and Nevernight, for some reason, just did not click with me. I pushed myself through it, and at the end of it, I just didn't really feel anything either way. Mia kind of grated on my nerves. Ash obviously grated on my nerves, and then I found out about what happens in future books, and I just didn't really love that particular pairing. So yeah, I don't think that I'm probably going to continue on with God's Grave or whatever the last book in that is. I don't know, I didn't love Nevernight enough for me to want to finish that series. Question number 4 is I hate this trope, but I loved this book. And I think what I'm gonna go with here is Ash Princess. There is a love triangle, and I despise love triangles. Y'all know that I am not scared of talking about that on this channel. I don't particularly like love triangles, mostly because I always root for the wrong person, and so I got into the habit of like flipping to the end of the book. I know this is sacrilegious, but like I would flip to the end of the book and find out who I needed to root for, because otherwise, like, if I did not know who she was going to be with, it would just color the entire reading experience for me negatively because like the back and forth is usually just so incredibly unnecessary. So Ash Princess is one that I actually think that the love triangle was done fairly well. Obviously, I still need to read the last two books in this series. However, I am 99% sure that I know who she ends up with in the very end, and I am okay with that, and it's fine. I know who I'm rooting for out of that particular love triangle, and Ash Princess did the love triangle in a way that it was a background plotline without taking over the actual importance of the story, which is the fact that she is a hostage princess and she's just trying to save her people the best way that she knows how. And while there were romances happening, there were romantic plot lines in the background, it just did not usurp the main plot of the book, and I really enjoyed that about it. Question number 5 is, I love this author, but I did not love this book. There's a couple that I can go with here, some more controversial than others. So I'm a big Sarah J. Maas fan. I don't like keep that a secret on this channel. However, I really didn't like Throne of Glass when I read it. I DNF'd it the first time, and when I decided to go back into the Throne of Glass series, I actually never went back and finished Throne of Glass. I just started Crown of Midnight because I did not feel the need to know how it ended. I think I might have gone and read like a wiki summary kind of thing of the ending, but I literally have never actually read Throne of Glass all the way through. Another one is A Court of Silver Flames. I just thought that so much of that book was unnecessary and that Sarah J. Maas got a little bit too hung up on finally writing an adult fantasy officially for the first time and just decided to pack as much sex into it as she could. And I am not shy about reading smut. I read a lot of smut, but that was just too much. It took over the plot. It was just way over the top. And honestly, similar things about the second Crescent City book. I have a reading blog where I talk about the issues that I had with her pacing and all of that stuff. So that's my Sarah J. Maas rant. I think another book that I didn't love as much as I wanted to was Mirror Sight by Kristen Britton. This is one of the books in the Green Rider series. I don't remember which number off the top of my head. It is a book in which I'm going to talk a little bit. It's not really spoilery, but I am going to discuss a little bit of the plot of Mirror Sight, so if you guys don't want to know what happens, you can skip to the time code that I'm about to put here. But Mirror Sight is, I mean, we've read several books at this point about Kerrigan and, well, Zachary's romance and all of that stuff. However, this book, at the end of the previous book, she had kind of been sent into a weird alternate dimension, and you find out that that happens in this book, and she's in like this weird steampunky futuristic world, and I don't know if it was because there was such a large gap between the previous book and this one, because Kristen Britton does take like 4 or 5 years usually in between finishing her novels. So I don't know if I had like forgotten that that's what happened at the end of the last book and I wasn't expecting this, and that really detracted from my enjoyment of it for me. But seeing Kerrigan and spending like 700 pages with her in an entirely new place with nobody that she knows, nobody she's acquainted with, and literally has like nothing to do, it felt like, with the rest of the plot of the series, it wasn't enjoyable for me. Like, I read it, I pushed through it anyway, and by the end of it, I did start to like it more. It's definitely probably my least favorite of the entire Green Rider series, just because now, while I understand the implications of what all of that means, at the time I was like, what the fuck is happening, and I don't like any of this. Number 7 is, I previously disliked a book by this author, but I liked this book, and I hate to talk about Jay Kristoff again, but I am going to, because while I don't think that I like Jay Kristoff's things that he's written by himself, I did turn out to be a pretty big fan of the things that he writes with Amy Kaufman. So I read Nevernight, I'm pretty sure first, and then I read Illuminae. And let me tell you, I read Illuminae while we were on a road trip back home. It's a 10-hour car ride for us. And I finished Illuminae while we were in the car, almost home, I think. We like had almost gotten there, and I was like, oh my god, I need to know what happens next. Ordered the next 2 books in the series so that they would be delivered back to my parents' house while we were there, so that I could read them on the drive back here. And I did all of that. I enjoyed it immensely. I think I only got through Gemina on my way back, and I had to pick up Obsidio a couple of days later. I was obsessed with Illuminae, and honestly, this is a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I really like the Aurora Cycle, I think it's called, whatever, too. I enjoyed those. I enjoy Illuminae a lot more. Of the trilogy, Aurora Rising is my favorite. I still really liked the sci-fi that he wrote with Amy Kaufman. I don't really like what J. Kristoff writes by himself. And I guess to follow that up, I mean, my first experience with Sarah J. Maas was Throne of Glass, and I obviously didn't like it because I DNF'd it, but all of the things that I have read since, except for the ones that I just talked about, I have enjoyed, so that counts for this too. Number 7 is I love this cover, but I didn't like this book, and one of the ones that I can only think of for this, because I tend to love most covers, so this doesn't really narrow much down for me, but The Curse of the Spectre Queen by Jenny Elder Moak. I technically own this, I'm just too lazy to go and get it, so I'll pop a picture of it up over here for you guys. I thought that this sounded so good, and I thought that this cover was absolutely beautiful, and it's like a beginning of the 1900s female Indiana Jones-like character goes on a hunt for a supernatural kind of thing in an Indiana Jones-like fashion. I said it in that vague way because that is honestly the majority of the plot that I can remember. I was so underwhelmed by this. I think that I just wasn't the target audience for it. I think that this did read a lot more on the younger side of YA, and it just did not click for me. Even though that cover is beautiful, the plot sounded perfect, I didn't click with the characters, I didn't click with the storyline, I don't really have any interest in reading any of the other books that have come out in this series since, so yeah, unfortunately, that's the answer to this question. The last question is I don't like this cover, but I love this book. Honestly, I don't really have much of an answer for this. There are a lot of covers that I don't love, but most of the modern covers that are coming out, I don't really have a problem with, except for the new Akhdar covers. I absolutely despise those. I guess technically that would count for this, except for the fact that I read Akhdar before they changed those. So I guess I'm gonna go classic fantasy on this, and the Gondola Cycle, let me just show you guys the beauty of this. So the Gondola Cycle is a book that I've talked about recently, well, a series of books that I have talked about recently in a TBR video. So I have mentioned that I'm planning on reading The Steel of Wraithscar this month, and these covers are just not it for me. They're very classic fantasy though, so like it's not like I can really hate them, but it's just, it has not aged very well with the way that the covers look now. I think that they're obviously, this came out, let's see, the 80s. This was printed in the 80s, this particular edition, so they're not updating this anytime soon. I'm not even sure that the authors for this book are actually even still alive anymore, but I loved them when I read them. I am hoping that they will hold up to this day, and I will still love them, but yeah, that's probably one of the ones that I just have a hard time looking at the cover. I try and avoid it at all costs if absolutely possible. So yeah, it's not great. Another cover that I don't like in a book that I've mentioned recently is another classic fantasy. It's not really fair to include them on this because that's what was in for cover art at that time. But the Bulgarian, I've showed you guys my edition of it, and that is probably my favorite cover that I have seen because it's a lot more toned down than the person on the cover in your face that was so common at that time for fantasy novels. So Bulgarian, I guess, would be another one of those. And the last question is technically to tag someone. Everybody's done this at this point, so I tag you if you would like to do this video. I'm not really going to tag anybody in particular, but if you haven't done this yet and you would really like to, absolutely go for it. Consider yourself tagged. But that's all the questions for this one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see any more content from me. Down in my description box, you are going to see a rep code for Hello Lovely box, which is CAT15 for 15% off of your order. Underneath that are links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram in case you guys wanted to follow me on any of those. But that's it for me today, guys, so I'll talk to you in my next one. Bye!